Before all these tomatoes behind me bite the dust, I figured it was a good time to kind of look at our production, do a little evaluation here. We grew quite a few varieties this year, at least 10 varieties behind me. So I want to take an opportunity to talk about each of these varieties, how they perform for us, and which ones we really like the best. Probably should have shot this video a week or so ago. They were looking a lot better then. We've had at least a stretch of a week and a half of 95+ degree weather down here in South Georgia, and tomatoes usually don't like temperatures above 90, so we're losing plants by the day here. Some varieties we're still getting really good harvest from, but you'll notice a lot of the plants are starting to die, and that's just a factor of the temperature we're experiencing, the really high humidity we have down here in the south, and our disease pressure just escalates just super high this time of year. So y'all don't be too rough on me out there. I promise these plants looked a lot better a week or so ago. So here's our tomato plot here. Well, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows. You'll see some red ones and some pink ones there. So we planted a bunch of different varieties. We got a row of Bella Rosa right here, row of Brickyard right here, a row of Summer Pick right here. This row we've got Red Snapper and Celebration. This row we've got these Tachi Roma tomatoes and Homestead. And then this row we've got a bunch of cherries on the end. And here we've got a few kind of heirloom specialty types, some black creme and some of this Chef's Choice orange. Now, if you've been following along on our Instagram or some of our other videos, you know we had some issues with our Florida weave. Not that there's anything wrong with the Florida weave, but I tried to get too many years out of these old wooden stakes right here. And when we got a lot of rain in here, and as I've been watering these guys, some of my stakes rotted. And when they rotted, all this kind of fell over. Now the good thing about the Florida weave is it kind of keeps everything intact. So if you can kind of lean it back up, everything's going to be all right. So I had to use some T-posts in here, some of our tomato cages, just anything I could find to get everything kind of lean back up and straighten back up. I think in future years for my Florida weave, I'm probably going to go with some thick rebar, because that stuff will last forever. I don't have to worry about rotting. Or maybe some of these smaller looking kind of T-posts like that. I think I'm gonna have to get away from the wooden stakes, just because, you know, if they do rot on you like this year, it's just gonna cause some problems. But considering what we dealt with here, and a lot of it was just because these plants were big and they were just loaded down with tomatoes. As we've started picking some, we've took the pressure off of them a little bit. But man, it was just too heavy. So I think I need to go with some rebar, some bigger stakes, or some non-wooden stakes. But for the most part, everything is held up pretty well considering what we had to deal with. So now that we've seen the plot as a whole, let's talk about which varieties have impressed us the most. We tried quite a few new varieties this year, some of those being the Summer Pick hybrid, the Red Snapper, and the Tachi tomato, all which are kind of disease resistant hybrids. We grew the Bella Rosa and the Brickyard, which we've grown the Bella Rosa for many years. We grew the Brickyard last year. And what was interesting to me is how the plants looked early on was not necessarily indicative of the harvest we were getting later on. Some of these varieties just look loaded and just really good, tall, vigorous plants early on, but that didn't necessarily always result in massive harvest. And the one variety that I thought kind of looked the puniest is the tried and true one that's given us the most tomatoes. And as I mentioned to you earlier, there's really not been any stinkers out here. We've gotten good harvest off all of these. But I've got 3 or 4 that have been my top ones that I'll tell you about, that I'm definitely gonna grow every year from here on out. So let's start off with numero uno here, which is our Bella Rosa. This tomato variety, we've been growing it for over 10 years, and it just never fails to impress. It's just, I mean, loaded down. There's this row right here, there's at least, you know, 1.5, close to 2 5-gallon buckets worth of tomatoes on here. And these plants didn't get near as big as some of the other varieties. They didn't look very impressive early on, but you want to talk about production. This is the most productive variety I grew this year. The most productive variety we've ever grown. It no matter what we compare it to, every year this Bella Rosa just knocks it out of the park. I mean, just loaded down. Look at all those right there. Now we pick our tomatoes just because anything can happen out here. We get too much rain, something can happen to them, so we don't let them get vine ripe. We pick them all when they start turning like that. So you got, you know, 6 or 7 tomatoes you can pick right there in a little 2 square foot box. So the production on these is just out of this world. As always, you know, #1 winner right here. The close second is the Brickyard here. It did really well last year for us. It's done really well this year for us. We've lost a plant or 2 here and there, but this is a very vigorous variety. The plants do get a little bit bigger than the Bella Rosa. The tomatoes are a little bit bigger than the Bella Rosa. You can see right there. So the Bella Rosa is kind of your standard size tomato. Fits kind of decent in the palm of your hand right there. That Brickyard is a little bit bigger tomato if you want some real big slices. But as far as disease resistant goes, these 2 are winners and will remain winners. And these have been my 2 most productive varieties I have grown. Row #3 was one we've never grown before, called the Summer Pick, and it's got some good disease resistance on it. For some reason we lost a few more plants here than we would have liked. We lost 2 or 3 plants along here, but the production here has been really, really good. I'll show you a couple right here. So this plant right here is loaded down with, you know, 5 or 6 tomatoes that need to be harvested now. And these taste really good. I like the taste on the Summer Pick. Yeah, can't complain about this variety at all. Don't know why I lost just those few. There's just kind of random plant or 2 here and there I lost. But the production has been super good. And the only reason I wouldn't put it right up there with the Brickyard and the Bella Rosa is just because we lost these few random plants here. But besides that, production's been good. The size of these tomatoes is probably right there along with the Bella Rosa as far as size goes. You can see in there a few of them right there. So just kind of your average size tomato, you know, between a baseball and a softball or so. Nothing wrong with this Summer Pick. I would grow it again. I probably wouldn't put it right up there at the top of the list with the Brickyard or the Bella Rosa, but a very, very close race here. Now my 3rd favorite that I grew this year is this red snapper here. And this is the one I had the most issues with keeping upright because these plants are just, they just got really, really big. And these tomatoes are big. If you like big, massive tomatoes, look at that guy right there. This is the variety you need to be growing. These things are bigger than a softball. They're just absolutely huge. Plants seem to be probably, these are probably the most vigorous plants of any I have so far. Just really, really good disease resistance on these. You can't tell it now because it's getting into July and this happens with all of them, but you can see there's some nice, big, juicy, meaty tomatoes here. These things are really, really tasty. I would say the productivity is not quite what it is on the Brickyard and the Bella Rosa, but the tomatoes are a lot bigger. The plants are a little more vigorous. So these might last a little longer. Later into the growing season, you get more harvest off of them. So it might equal out. Weight-wise, it's probably the same. But as far as number of tomatoes, it's a hair bit behind the Bella Rosa and the Brickyard. And you can see we're still getting a lot of new tomatoes forming out here. You know, there's a few in there right there. So This is my close third, is a red snapper. And then my number 4 favorite that I liked is this kind of Roma type tomato here, and these plants have taken a beating the last few days. This variety here is called Tachi, and you can just look in here at how loaded these guys are. In the past, we've grown the Amish paste, which is kind of an heirloom Roma / paste type tomato. The production on these blows the Amish paste just slap out of the water. I mean, these things just load up. We've been picking a bunch of these. You can see them there, how they're just loaded. I wish those plants didn't look as pitiful, but it is what it is. Just to give you an idea of what you're going to get production wise, these Tachis, you know, if you like growing paste tomatoes, sauce tomatoes, this is the one to go with here. It's got some disease resistant properties on it, and it hung on, you know, for a good little while, but not many tomatoes are going to make it through 95 degrees and really intense humidity. But, you know, like I said, this one here, number 4 on my list, definitely going to grow this one again. Just can't beat that kind of production from a paste tomato. And then I will mention this Celebration and the Homestead varieties. The plants on these look pretty awesome, especially the Homestead ones there. They just get pretty tall, and I didn't realize they were going to get that tall, and my trellising system wasn't really equipped for that. But they make some nice tomatoes. Nothing wrong with them. They taste really good. I can't really get in there to show you because it's like a forest in there. But you can see some of these Celebrations right here, and they're just loaded up. The tomatoes aren't as big. They're kind of, you know, slightly smaller than a baseball for both of these varieties here. I can't complain about either of these varieties either. I just, you know, need a little better, taller trellising system for them because they just get taller. But as far as the vigor of the varieties and, you know, just how the plants are hanging on in the heat, especially these Homesteads, you know, they seem to be doing really, really well. The production is not that equal with the Bella Rosa, but the plants seem to be hanging on pretty well. Now, if you watch a lot of our videos, you probably already know this, but I'm not a huge fan of the heirloom type tomatoes, the kind of funky looking, you know, different colored tomatoes. I love to eat them. They taste great. But the production is just not there. And I only got so much space. Even though I got a pretty decent sized garden, I've only got so much space for tomatoes, and I want to maximize my yield on that space. And these modern day hybrids taste just as good as those heirlooms, and you're getting so much more productivity. I bet I'm getting, you know, somewhere between 5 to 10 times more tomatoes from these hybrids than I am some of those heirloom types. And you just can't compete with that, especially if your goal is, like ours was this year, is to put up or can tomatoes. You got to be growing these hybrids, you know, not counting the disease resistance, but just the production is absolutely amazing compared to some of the heirlooms. Now, I mentioned to you earlier that we don't wait for all of ours to get vine ripe. We pick them, you know, just when they're starting to turn, even like that right there. Just because you never know what can happen. Worms can get in them. Even though we hadn't had a ton of worm pressure, worms can get in them. You can get too much rain all of a sudden, make them split. So we pick them pink, anything from, you know, just turning greenish pink to, you know, getting close to being ripe like that. Let me show you what we do with them once we pick them. So once I pick my tomatoes, I don't put them in the house for several reasons. One, my wife fusses about taking up all the dining room table room with tomatoes. The second reason, more importantly, is we have found over the years that you don't want to shock them too much temperature wise. Certainly you don't want to put them in the fridge, or not at least these big tomatoes like this, you don't. We'll put cherry tomatoes in the fridge. They do okay. But the big ones here, you don't want to shock them much temperature wise. So we just lay them out on these tables here underneath our little pole barn, you see there. So we're underneath here and we just lay them on these tables. You know, we don't want to stack them on top of one another, give them a little room, and we just let them ripen right here. And then when we get a mess of them that are all ripe, like you see right here, that's when you know it's canning time. And that's what we end up with right there. Pretty stuff right there. Now we've canned about 30 jars so far, and not even close to being finished. We'll probably get another 15 or so jars from this right here, and then once I get these out of the way and pick those I just showed you, probably another 15. So we're going all in on canning tomatoes this year, just to show you a little bit of some of the ones that are ripe, what they look like. So this is one of those red snappers I was talking about, and you can see how big that is compared to my hand. That's bigger than a softball, just a massive tomato. Most of the Bella Rosas and the Brickyards and stuff are going to be about that size. Good slicing tomato, nothing wrong with that. You know, like I said, a little bit bigger than a baseball, smaller than a softball. We get a little bit of variation here. We can see our Tachis there, those sauce tomatoes. Those are looking nice and pretty there. And we don't really separate them in the canning process. We kind of just, you know, add all the tomatoes together. None of these tomatoes are lacking in flavor or taste. They've all tasted excellent. We have taste tested them on sandwiches and with the sauce and just about everything else you could imagine, and all of them taste great. And it's just, you know, some slight differences in production and plant vigor that we see. So it's been really fun to do this extensive of a tomato trial like we do this year. I always trial new varieties every year and compare them to kind of my tried and true favorites. But this year we trialed a bunch, a lot more than we usually do. And it's been really fun to compare them all and see how well they do. And like I told you earlier, I've got, you know, 4 home run hitter favorites that I'm definitely going to keep from years to come. Number 1 being the Bella Rosa, close second Brickyard. And then it's hard to compare them because they're 2 different style of tomatoes, but you've got that red snapper, big old tomatoes, vigorous plants, and then that paste tomato, that Tachi, right in there. So those are my 4 absolute winners. Another thing this year has confirmed is how much more I like those hybrids than I do the heirloom types. Nothing wrong with you folks, you know, that like to grow the heirloom tomatoes. I get it. They taste great. They look cool and everything. But my goal here is production. And with these hybrids, I don't have to sacrifice taste for production. I can have both. So I hope you enjoyed our tomato trial results or evaluation. And if you did, make sure to give me a big thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Also hit that bell button so you get notified every time we come out with a new video. I'll put some links below to all the varieties I showed you today so you can go check those out. And if you did enjoy this video, check out these other 2 videos we did right here earlier in the season when we planted and trellised these tomatoes. We'll see you next time.